I wasn't supposed to be here. Not like this. Not parked outside a stranger's house, gripping the steering wheel so tight my fingers went numb. But there I was, watching my wife, Jennifer, betray me in real time. Her car sat right next to his in the driveway. The lights inside the house were dim, but the occasional shadow moved behind the curtains. My gut twisted. I already knew what was happening in there. Beside me in the passenger seat, Megan, his wife, let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Looks like they're getting real comfortable," she muttered, her nails tapping impatiently against her phone screen. My stomach churned. I had spent weeks tracking Jennifer's movements, looking for any explanation other than the obvious. She wasn't the woman I married. Late nights at work, a new perfume she never wore around me, the way she guarded her phone like it held nuclear codes. It all added up, but I kept making excuses. Then, one night, I installed a tracking app on her phone while she slept. Call it paranoia, call it desperation. I just needed to know. And now, staring at her blinking location, parked in some random house with a man I'd never met, I finally had my answer. Megan shoved her phone into her coat pocket and exhaled sharply. "All right," she said, turning to me with eyes that burned with something between rage and grim determination. "Let's go ruin their night." I didn't move. Not yet. My pulse hammered in my ears. This wasn't a game. This was my wife. The woman I'd built a life with. "Chris," Megan snapped, dragging me back to reality. "Are you in or not?" I clenched my jaw. My hands shook, but I grabbed the door handle. "Yeah," I said. "Let's do this." We stepped out of the car into the cold night air. The quiet hum of the suburban street made the moment feel even more surreal. Megan marched ahead without hesitation, straight to the front door, while I hesitated for half a second longer. Then I followed. She didn't bother knocking. She had a key. Of course, she did. She shoved it into the lock, twisted it, and pushed the door open like she owned the place. The second we stepped inside, the sound hit me. Breathy laughter. Low murmurs. The unmistakable rustling of movement upstairs. Megan's lips curled into a cruel smirk. "Busted," she whispered. Then she cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted, "Honey, I'm home." A thud. A crash. Muffled voices. I felt like I was floating outside my own body. This was actually happening. Jennifer was upstairs, naked, tangled up with another man, and now she knew the jig was up. Heavy footsteps pounded against the floor above us. A moment later, a man came rushing down the stairs, still yanking on a pair of jeans. He was tall, built like a gym rat, with a face that probably worked on every woman he met. Every woman except the one standing next to me. Megan crossed her arms and cocked her head. "Hey, Ryan," she said flatly. "Didn't expect me tonight, did you?" Ryan froze on the last step, eyes darting between Megan and me like a trapped animal. "Megan, Save it," she snapped. "Where is she?" As if on cue, Jennifer's voice rang out from upstairs. "Who the hell is in my house?" My house. Something in me snapped. I charged up the stairs 2 at a time, heart slamming against my ribs. Behind me, I heard Megan spit out, "Unbelievable," before following close behind. At the top of the stairs, Jennifer stood in nothing but a bedsheet, clutching it to her chest like it was some kind of armor. Her face paled when she saw me. "Chris," she gasped. What are you doing here?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. "That's a great question, Jen. Maybe you can tell me why you're naked in another man's house first." Her eyes darted to Ryan, who had finally made it up the stairs. He looked at her, then at me, and slowly raised his hands like he was trying to defuse a bomb. "Look, man, Shut up," I growled. Jennifer's mouth opened and closed, searching for an excuse, a lie, something that could explain this away. But I saw the flicker of guilt before she even spoke. "You don't understand," she started, her voice dripping with fake innocence. "It's not what it looks like." Megan let out a sharp bark of laughter behind me. "Oh, come on, Jennifer. You're standing in front of your husband half naked in my house. Try a little harder than that." Jennifer's lips pressed into a thin line. Then, just like that, her entire demeanor changed. Her shoulders straightened. The guilt disappeared. And in its place, annoyance. All right, fine, she snapped, rolling her eyes. You caught me. Happy now? I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, waiting for her to break down and beg for forgiveness, or at least pretend to be sorry. But she didn't. Instead, she tilted her head, placed a hand on her hip, and actually had the audacity to look irritated. You shouldn't have followed me, Chris, she said. This is just embarrassing for you. A buzzing filled my ears. Blood. Rage. Megan let out a slow whistle. Wow. Just wow, she muttered. Ryan took a step back, clearly realizing that standing between a furious husband and his cheating wife wasn't the safest place to be. Smart guy. Jennifer sighed dramatically, like I was inconveniencing her. Look, can we just talk about this later? She huffed. This really isn't the time. Not the time? I repeated, barely recognizing my own voice. She threw her hands up. Yes. What do you want me to say, Chris? That I was bored? That you don't make me happy anymore? That maybe, just maybe, I needed someone who actually excites me. My stomach lurched, but I kept my face blank. Megan took a step forward, voice low and dangerous. You're a real piece of work, Jennifer. Jennifer rolled her eyes. Oh, please, Megan. Like you didn't see this coming. That did it. I stepped closer, towering over her. You want to talk about embarrassing? I said, my voice calm, too calm. Embarrassing is cheating on your husband and getting caught. Embarrassing is throwing away everything for a guy who can't even put his shirt on right now. Ryan cleared his throat, shuffling awkwardly. Jennifer's jaw clenched, but for the first time, she had nothing to say. Good. Because I wasn't done yet. Jennifer stood there, still clutching the bedsheet to her chest like it could hide what she'd done. But nothing could cover up the truth now. The room reeked of betrayal, cheap perfume, and bad decisions. And the worst part? She wasn't even sorry. Her face twisted into a half scowl, half smirk. All right, Chris. You caught me. What now? You want a prize for figuring it out? I blinked. For a moment, I thought I misheard her. Was she serious? No apologies. No remorse. Just attitude. Behind me, Megan leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, a cruel smile playing on her lips. I gotta say, she murmured, I expected tears, maybe some begging. But this? Bold move, Jen. Jennifer's eyes flashed with irritation. Oh, please. Spare me the righteous act, Megan. She shot back. Maybe if you paid attention to your husband, he wouldn't be crawling into my bed. Megan pushed off the doorframe, her knuckles cracking as she stepped forward. You've got some nerves, sweetheart, she said quietly. But let me make one thing clear. This isn't over until I say it's over. Jennifer rolled her eyes. What are you going to do? Cry about it? I couldn't take it anymore. My hands balled into fists at my sides, and I felt something inside me snap. I stepped between them, locking eyes with Jennifer. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice low and cold. I gave you everything. I trusted you. And this? This is how you pay me back. Jennifer scoffed. Oh, come on, Chris. Don't act like some innocent victim. Our marriage hasn't exactly been perfect. Don't, I warned. Don't you dare try to pin this on me. She lifted her chin. What do you expect? I was bored. You got comfortable, predictable. Meanwhile, Ryan. She tossed a glance over her shoulder at him. Well, at least he knows how to make me feel wanted. Ryan, to his credit, looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I let out a bitter laugh. Wanted? That's rich. What is this? Some midlife crisis fantasy? You throw away 7 years of marriage for a guy who can't even face me like a man? Hey, Ryan started, but I cut him off with a glare. Shut up, I snapped. You don't get a say in this. His mouth closed. Smart decision. Jennifer, on the other hand, wasn't done running her mouth. You never listened to me, she said, her voice rising. I tried to talk to you, but you were always too busy, too tired. So yeah, I found someone else, and guess what? I don't regret it. Her words hit harder than I expected. My chest tightened, a dull ache spreading through my ribs. I wanted to scream at her, to make her understand how much damage she'd done. But deep down, I knew she didn't care, and that hurt more than anything else. Megan stepped closer, her voice sharp as a knife. Let me get this straight. You're blaming him for your cheating? That's weak, even for you. Jennifer snorted. Whatever helps you sleep at night. I shook my head, trying to process how the woman I loved could turn into this. Why didn't you just leave me if you were so unhappy? I demanded. Her eyes narrowed. Because leaving would have been messy. And frankly, Chris, I didn't think you'd ever find out. There it was, the truth. Brutal, ugly, and I was done. I turned to Ryan, my voice razor sharp. You think this is funny? Sleeping with another man's wife? Is that your idea of being a real man? He shifted awkwardly, refusing to meet my gaze. It just happened, he mumbled. It didn't just happen, I spat. You made a choice. Both of you did. Jennifer sighed dramatically, as if this whole thing was an inconvenience. Look, Chris, I don't know what you want from me. I'm not going to beg. So if you're done playing detective, maybe you should leave. Megan let out a laugh, dark, humorless. You're unbelievable. You destroy your marriage and act like you're doing him a favor? Jennifer just shrugged. I'm not the one who's stuck in a loveless marriage. I took a step back, trying to steady my breathing. My hands trembled, but not from fear. From rage. From the weight of every broken promise. You know what? I said quietly. You're right. I am done. A flicker of surprise crossed Jennifer's face, but she masked it quickly. Good. I was getting tired of this conversation anyway. Megan tilted her head, watching Jennifer with a mixture of fascination and disgust. You're going to regret this, she said softly. Maybe not tonight, but one day, you'll realize you threw away a good man for this. Ryan bristled. Hey, save it, Megan snapped. You're not even worth the argument. I turned toward the stairs, my heart pounding. Every step away from that room felt like breaking free from a prison I didn't realize I was in. But before I left, I turned back one last time. You want to know the saddest part? I said, meeting Jennifer's cold gaze. I would have forgiven you. If you'd just been honest, I would have fought for us. Her expression didn't change. No guilt, no remorse, just indifference. Guess it's too late for that, she said, her tone flat. I nodded slowly. Yeah, it is. Without another word, I walked down the stairs, Megan close behind. When we stepped outside, the cold air hit me like a slap to the face. I inhaled deeply, trying to clear the lingering taste of betrayal. Megan sighed, pulling out her phone. Divorce lawyers getting a call first thing tomorrow, she muttered. I chuckled softly, though nothing about this felt funny. Yeah, same here. For a moment, we stood there, two strangers united by betrayal, before she turned to me with a raised brow. You okay? She asked. I thought about it. About everything I'd lost in the span of one night. Then I exhaled slowly. I will be. The drive home felt like a blur. My knuckles were white against the steering wheel, jaw clenched so tight it ached. Megan had taken her car and sped off without another word. No tearful breakdown, no dramatic scene. Just cold, bitter resolve. And honestly, I respected it. But me? I was a mess inside. I replayed the scene in my head. Jennifer's smug face, Ryan's pathetic excuse for an apology. Every word echoed, twisting the knife deeper. 7 years. 7 years of loyalty, of building a life together, tossed away like it meant nothing. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the rage had cooled into something heavier. Something hollow. The house was quiet, too quiet. Usually, Jennifer would be on the couch binge watching some trashy reality show, glass of wine in hand. But tonight, the silence pressed down on me like a weight. I dropped my keys on the table and sank into the nearest chair, head in my hands. My heart pounded against my ribs as the truth settled in. This wasn't just a bad dream. There was no fixing this. And the worst part? I still wanted to know why. Why wasn't I enough? I didn't have time to spiral any deeper. My phone buzzed on the table, and for a moment, I thought, maybe it's her. Maybe she regrets it. But it wasn't Jennifer. It was Megan. Megan, you good? I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. What did good even mean anymore? I typed back a quick reply. Me. I don't even know. Her response was immediate. Megan, yeah, me neither. You want to talk? I hesitated, but something in me needed an outlet. Someone who understood the mess. Me. Come over. 20 minutes later, Megan was sitting across from me at my kitchen table, a bottle of whiskey between us. Her makeup was smudged beneath her eyes. Whether from tears or exhaustion, I couldn't tell. Still can't believe it, she said, pouring herself a drink. I mean, I had my suspicions, but seeing it with my own eyes? She shook her head. It's different. I took a slow sip, the burn of alcohol barely registering. Guess we both married the wrong people. She laughed bitterly. No kidding. And Ryan? The guy can't even remember my birthday, but he's got time to sneak around with your wife. Class act. I wanted to laugh, but the ache in my chest was too raw. I keep wondering, when did it start? How long has she been lying to me? Megan swirled the amber liquid in her glass, lips pressed into a thin line. Probably longer than we think. People like them? They're not sorry. They're just sorry they got caught. I exhaled sharply, anger bubbling to the surface again. And the worst part? She didn't even try to deny it. No tears, no apologies, nothing. Just cold. Megan tilted her head, watching me carefully. And what about you? What are you gonna do next? I leaned back in my chair, running a hand through my hair. Divorce, obviously. I'm not gonna be the guy who sticks around while she plays house with someone else. Good. Her voice was firm. Don't let her play you. She doesn't deserve it. Her conviction stirred something in me, a resolve I didn't know I still had. I want answers, I admitted. I don't know why, but I need to hear her say it. I need to know how long she's been making a fool out of me. Megan's eyes narrowed slightly. You sure you want to open that door? What if you don't like what you hear? Doesn't matter, I said quietly. I'm done being in the dark. The next morning, I didn't wait for Jennifer to come crawling back. I went straight to her. When I pulled up outside Ryan and Megan's house, her car was still in the driveway, right next to his. Perfect. I rang the doorbell, heart hammering in my chest. No turning back now. It was Jennifer who answered. She froze when she saw me, lips parting in surprise. Chris. I pushed past her into the house. We need to talk. Behind her, Ryan stood awkwardly near the couch, half-dressed, like the weasel he was. I ignored him. Jennifer folded her arms, her face settling into that same defiant mask. What do you want now? I want the truth, I said, voice hard. How long? Her expression didn't waver. 6 months, she said flatly. Does that make you feel better? 6 months. Half a year of lies. Of sneaking around behind my back. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to stay calm. Why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why wasn't I enough for you? She let out a humorless laugh. This again? Chris, you became boring. Routine. I wanted excitement, and guess what? Ryan gave it to me. Ryan shifted uncomfortably but stayed quiet. Smart move. Boring? I repeated, anger flaring again. I worked my asterisk off to give us a good life. And because I wasn't entertaining enough, you threw it all away? Jennifer sighed, as if I was the one being unreasonable. I didn't throw anything away, but I'm not going to apologize for wanting more. That was it. The final nail in the coffin. You're unbelievable, I muttered. You don't even feel guilty, do you? Her gaze stayed cold. Not really. I laughed softly, because what else was there to do? Well, you win, Jen. I'm done. You want Ryan? Have him. I'm not playing this game anymore. I turned on my heel and headed for the door, not waiting for a response. I didn't need one. By the time I got back to my car, the weight on my chest felt lighter. Not gone, but lighter. And as I drove away, I knew one thing for sure. Jennifer and Ryan deserved each other. And me? I deserved better. I should have felt relief after walking out of that house, but I didn't. The anger? Still there. The betrayal? Still burned like acid in my chest. But what gnawed at me most wasn't the cheating itself. It was her indifference. The way Jennifer looked at me like I was some inconvenience she was finally free of. After 7 years together, that was all I meant to her? I couldn't let it go. Not yet. I spent the rest of the day pretending to move on, running errands, hitting the gym, but my mind was locked on one thing. I needed to understand everything. If I was going to burn my marriage to the ground, I wanted to watch the flames from every angle, and as fate would have it, an opportunity came sooner than expected. That evening, Megan called. "You're not gonna believe this," she said, voice tight with anger. "Ryan's begging to come home." I almost laughed. "Let me guess, Jennifer kicked him out already?" "Exactly." Megan sighed on the other end of the line. "I told him to rot in hell, but now he's love-bombing me with apologies." "Typical. Desperate people make desperate moves," I muttered. "They're turning on each other already." Megan hesitated. "Listen, I've been thinking. What if we hit back?" That got my attention. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we don't sit back and let them play us like fools. They wanted to screw around behind our backs. Let's make it their problem. I know things about Ryan he wouldn't want getting out." Her words were sharp, too sharp. I leaned forward, heart pounding harder. "Megan, what exactly are you suggesting?" There was a pause. "I'm saying we stop being the victims, Chris. We've got nothing left to lose." I won't lie. Part of me wanted to dive headfirst into whatever chaos she had in mind. But the rational part? It warned me that playing their game might make me just as bad as them. And yet, the idea of making Jennifer squirm? That was tempting. "All right," I said slowly. "I'm listening." By the next day, we had a plan. Step 1. Break their fragile little world. Megan sent Ryan a text pretending to be open to working things out. He took the bait without hesitation, eager to come crawling back. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet, knowing Jennifer would start wondering why I hadn't called or exploded yet. And sure enough, it didn't take long for her to crack. Late that evening, her name flashed across my phone screen. For a second, I debated ignoring it. But curiosity got the better of me. "Chris," she began, voice smooth, too smooth. "I think we need to talk." I leaned against the kitchen counter, keeping my tone casual. "Oh? About what?" A pause. She didn't like that I wasn't biting. "Don't play dumb. You stormed out like a child. Is this how you handle problems now?" I laughed under my breath. "Funny. I thought sneaking around was more your style." Her sigh crackled through the phone. "Look, I'm not saying I didn't mess up, but we can be adults about this. Maybe we rushed things yesterday." I almost choked on the irony. "We rushed things? Jennifer, you've been carrying on with Ryan for 6 months behind my back. Don't pretend you suddenly care about being adults now." Silence. Then, softer, too soft. "I didn't mean for things to happen like this." There it was. The classic cheater's excuse. "Yeah," I said coldly. "What did you mean to happen? Keep me on standby while you played house with another man?" She didn't answer, and I realized she wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling to check her control, and that's when I decided to rip it away from her. "You know what, Jennifer? Don't bother explaining. I already know everything I need." Her voice sharpened. "What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled to myself. "You'll find out soon enough." Step 2. Let the truth come crashing down. By the next morning, Megan and I were ready to drop the bomb. She sent Ryan a carefully worded text, luring him to a coffee shop under the pretense of talking things through. Meanwhile, I did something even more ruthless. I sent Jennifer a message with just one line. "You might want to check your husband's location." And like clockwork, her car pulled up at the cafe 20 minutes later. I parked across the street, watching the scene unfold. Jennifer stormed through the doors, eyes blazing, just as Megan leaned across the table and said something that made Ryan pale. I wish I could have heard the words, but their reactions were enough. Jennifer snapped. She slammed a hand on the table, sending Ryan's coffee spilling everywhere. Megan stayed icy calm, feeding the fire perfectly. Ryan stammered, trying to placate both women at once, but he was drowning. And for the first time in days, I felt something close to satisfaction. They wanted chaos? They got it. Later that night, Jennifer showed up at our house. I didn't invite her in. Her face was twisted with frustration. "Was that your plan? Humiliate me?" I leaned against the doorframe, unfazed. "No. My plan was to stop being your fool." She let out a bitter laugh. "And what, Megan's your new best friend now?" I didn't bother denying it. At least she's honest. Her expression hardened. You think you've won something here, Chris? You haven't. You'll never find someone like me again. And finally, I laughed. A deep, genuine laugh. God, I hope not. I didn't let her say another word. I shut the door in her face. And for the first time in weeks, I felt free. I should have known Jennifer wouldn't take the loss quietly. For a few days, things were quiet, too quiet. Megan and I kept in touch, mostly sharing updates as Ryan spiraled. He'd moved out of their house and was bouncing between hotels, apparently too proud to crawl back home. Meanwhile, Jennifer? She disappeared. No calls, no texts. But something in my gut told me this wasn't over. I was right. It started small. A random message from one of our mutual friends, someone I hadn't spoken to in months. Hey man, just checking in. Heard you and Jen are having some issues. I stared at my phone, feeling a chill creep up my spine. Jennifer wasn't just moving on. She was controlling the narrative. By the time the third concerned friend reached out, I'd had enough. I needed to know exactly what she was telling people. So, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I called her. She answered on the second ring, her voice smooth as ever. Chris, she said sweetly, miss me already? I ignored the bait. Cut the crap, Jennifer. Why are people suddenly so interested in our marriage? A pause. Then, a low chuckle. Maybe because they care? You always were paranoid. Her tone was so casual, so cocky, that I almost lost it right there. But I kept my voice even. If you want to run your mouth, fine, but don't lie about me. She scoffed. Oh, please. I'm not lying. I'm just giving people my perspective. My jaw tightened. Your perspective? That you're bitter, controlling, that you always had a temper. Sound familiar? I couldn't help but laugh. You really think anyone's buying that? Some already have, she purred. And by the time I'm done, no one will care about your sob story. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about the affair anymore. She wanted to destroy me. Megan didn't sugarcoat it when I told her. She's scared, she said. When people like Jennifer lose control, they go nuclear. I shook my head. I just want to be done with her. Megan hesitated before answering. Then maybe it's time we push back harder. I raised an eyebrow. What are you suggesting? You know her secrets. Use them. I should have said no. I should have walked away while I still could. But something inside me snapped. If Jennifer wanted a war, I'd give her one. Step 1. Uncover the skeletons. I dug deep. Old emails, financial records, anything that might reveal what she was hiding. And sure enough, it didn't take long to find something big. Jennifer wasn't just cheating on me. She was stealing from me. Over the past year, she'd quietly funneled thousands from our joint account into a private one. Not for bills. Not for emergencies. For herself. The worst part? I never even noticed. I had everything I needed to bury her. But there was still one missing piece. And Megan? She had the key. Ryan's breaking, she told me the next day. If we push a little harder, he'll spill. Are you sure? A smile crept into her voice. Trust me. He's not as tough as he pretends to be. So we pushed. Megan dangled the possibility of forgiveness, if he was honest about everything. And within 2 days, Ryan cracked. Jennifer planned it all, he confessed during a tense phone call. From the moment we hooked up, she talked about how to get out of the marriage and walk away with as much as she could. She even joked about ruining you if you ever found out. I felt my blood run cold. And you went along with it? He exhaled shakily. I didn't think she'd actually do it. Step 2. Turn the tables. I called Jennifer the next morning, keeping my tone calm, too calm. We need to talk, I said. She laughed softly. Finally realized you can't live without me? No. I realized you've been robbing me blind. The silence on the other end was deafening. You think I won't expose you? I pressed. The money, the lies. Hell, even Ryan rolled on you. This ends now, Jennifer. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost its sweetness. You wouldn't dare. I smiled coldly. Try me. That afternoon, I met with my lawyer. I laid everything out, the affair, the financial theft, the manipulation. And with the evidence I had, Things moved fast. Within a week, Jennifer received divorce papers. And to make matters worse, I froze the accounts she'd been draining. Her furious calls came like clockwork, but I didn't answer. Let her burn. One night, Megan and I met for drinks to celebrate. "Think she's learned her lesson?" she asked, swirling her wine glass. I chuckled. "Doubt it. People like her? They never do." She tilted her head. "And you? What have you learned?" I paused, considering my answer. Never ignore the red flags. And never, ever, let someone else control your story. Megan smiled. Smart man. For the first time in months, I felt free. The anger, the pain, it wasn't gone, but it didn't own me anymore. And Jennifer? She was just a bad chapter in a book I was finally ready to close. I should have known Jennifer wouldn't go down quietly. The divorce papers were just the beginning. Freezing our accounts? That was the match that lit the fire. For a few days, everything seemed calm, but that's how storms always start. Quiet, until they hit. It began with a call from my boss. "Chris," he said, voice tight, "we need to talk." I knew that tone. I'd heard it when he fired a guy for embezzlement last year. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to stay calm. An anonymous email came in. Allegations of inappropriate behavior. Affairs in the office. He paused. "It's serious." I felt my stomach drop. Jennifer. She was trying to tear down everything I had left. I took a breath, forcing myself to stay steady. "It's a lie," I said firmly. "Can I see the email?" When it landed in my inbox 5 minutes later, I almost laughed. It was sloppy. Too many details only someone personally involved could know. Jennifer wasn't even trying to hide it was her. But the damage? That was real. Megan's voice was sharp when I told her. "She's desperate," she said. "And if you don't hit back harder, she'll keep coming." "I'm already on it," I assured her. "But this isn't just about me anymore. If she's willing to pull this, who knows what's next?" Megan hesitated. "Then maybe it's time we end this for good." I leaned back, feeling a weight settle in my chest. "Yeah, it's time." Step 1. Neutralize the threat. I called my lawyer again, this time pushing for an emergency injunction. With the evidence I had, financial theft, her attempts to ruin my reputation, it didn't take long. Within 48 hours, Jennifer received a cease and desist order. The next day, her accounts were officially frozen. She couldn't touch a dime. Step 2. Turn her allies against her. Jennifer had always been a master manipulator, but I still had the truth. And truth? It's a powerful weapon when used right. I started with Ryan. Megan arranged another call, keeping things casual until I joined. The moment I did, his voice cracked. "What do you want?" "I want you to tell the truth," I said quietly. "Not to me, to everyone." Ryan let out a bitter laugh. "And why would I do that?" "Because if you don't," I said, "I'll let your wife know exactly how much you've been lying to her." "How do you think Megan will react when she finds out you knew Jennifer was stealing from me?" Silence. Then a sigh. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll tell the truth." Within a week, everything shifted. Ryan came clean to his wife. Megan? She didn't just leave him, she destroyed him. Word spread fast. Jennifer's web of lies was unraveling. By the time my boss called me back, the damage was already reversed. "I'm sorry," he said. "We've verified your side. Consider this closed." One battle down. One more to go. Step 3. Deliver the knockout punch. I waited until Jennifer's world was properly falling apart before I made my final move. I knew exactly where she'd be, at her gym. Same time, every Friday. Creature of habit. I didn't call. I didn't text. I showed up. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed. "What do you want, Chris?" I smiled coldly. "To end this." She leaned back against the wall, arms crossed. "You already took my money. What else could you possibly do?" "Everything," I said simply. "I know about the offshore account, the one you didn't think I'd find." For the first time, she flinched. "Bingo. I have the documents," I continued. "You took marital assets and tried to hide them. That's a felony, Jennifer." Her cocky mask cracked. "You wouldn't." I leaned in, lowering my voice. You think I won't bury you to protect what's mine? Her hands trembled, but she didn't speak. She knew I had her. So here's the deal, I said. You sign the divorce papers, no contest, no spousal support, nothing, and I won't press charges. You're bluffing, she whispered. I pulled a manila folder from my bag and handed it to her. See for yourself. When she opened it, all the color drained from her face. I turned to leave. You have 24 hours. After that, I'm done playing nice. That night, she called me. Her voice? Shaky. I'll sign, she said quietly. I didn't even smile. Good choice. By the following week, it was over. Legally, financially, personally. Jennifer was out of my life. Ryan lost everything. And me? I walked away clean, with my reputation, my career, and my future intact. A month later, Megan and I met up again. Same bar, same booth. You did it, she said, raising her glass. I clinked mine against hers. We did it. So, she asked, what's next? I smiled. Anything I want. Jennifer had tried to break me. She thought I'd be her next victim. But the truth? I was always 10 steps ahead. Jennifer thought she was invincible. For years, she played the game, twisting the truth, manipulating everyone around her, always landing on her feet no matter how dirty her hands got. But life has a funny way of balancing the scales. And after everything she did, it was only a matter of time before karma came knocking. It didn't take long for her perfect facade to shatter. Once the divorce was finalized, Jennifer lost more than just the money. She lost the reputation she worked so hard to maintain. People talk, especially when you give them a reason. And after Ryan confessed the truth about their affair and her schemes, the gossip spread like wildfire. The same friends she once controlled with charm and lies, they turned on her without hesitation. At first, she tried to keep up appearances, posting fake smiles on social media, pretending everything was fine. But underneath that polished surface, she was drowning. Her accounts were drained, and with the court ruling against her, there would be no spousal support. Every financial cushion she relied on was gone. She moved out of the fancy townhouse we once shared and into a cramped apartment on the edge of the city. No more luxury shopping sprees. No more weekend getaways. Just her, alone, with nothing but the consequences of her own choices. But the real collapse? That came when she lost her job. For years, Jennifer built a reputation as a sharp, sophisticated professional. But in the corporate world, image is everything. And once the rumors about her affair and financial deception surfaced, it wasn't long before her employers caught wind of it. The email she sent to my boss in an attempt to ruin my career? That backfired. Her own company found out about her anonymous smear campaign, and within days, she was quietly let go. No public scandal, just a simple, cold termination letter. She tried to fight it. Of course, she did. Jennifer never accepted defeat gracefully. But without evidence to clear her name, she had no leverage left. And the people who once stood by her, they vanished. Ryan, the man she wrecked our marriage for, didn't stick around either. After Megan left him and took the kids, his life unraveled fast. Losing his family, his home, and his pride all at once broke whatever fragile bond he and Jennifer had. Their fiery, reckless affair turned into cold indifference. Without the thrill of sneaking around, they had nothing. One day, he simply packed his bags and left. No goodbye, no closure, just another ghost in Jennifer's crumbling life. For the first time in years, she had no one. And while she tried to act like she didn't care, I knew better. Jennifer always needed someone to control, someone to twist around her finger. With no one left to manipulate, the emptiness caught up with her fast. The last time I heard about her, she was bouncing between freelance gigs, barely scraping by. Her once flawless social media pages? Abandoned. No more glamorous photos. No more smug posts about how perfect her life was. Just silence. But here's the thing about karma. It doesn't just take away. Sometimes, it leaves you with exactly what you deserve. And for Jennifer, that meant living with herself. As for me, I moved on. It wasn't easy. The betrayal cut deeper than I ever thought possible. The memories of her lies, The late nights I spent wondering how long she'd been playing me didn't fade overnight. But eventually, I stopped letting the anger define me. I learned how to rebuild. I focused on my career, pouring my energy into projects that actually mattered. Without Jennifer siphoning my time and money, my professional life flourished. Promotions came faster. Doors I thought were closed swung wide open. And with every step forward, the weight of her betrayal grew lighter. I also reconnected with the people who mattered. For years, Jennifer isolated me, slowly cutting me off from friends who saw through her facade. But once she was out of the picture, those bridges were easier to rebuild. I surrounded myself with people who didn't just tolerate me, they respected me. And that was worth more than anything I'd lost. And then there was Megan. Our bond, born from shared pain, deepened in ways I never expected. We weren't just two people recovering from broken marriages. We were survivors, walking through the fire and coming out stronger. Over time, the late-night calls and quiet drinks became something more, something real. She understood the scars Jennifer left behind because she had her own. And together, we learned how to heal. One evening, months after the dust settled, I found myself back in the same parking lot where everything unraveled. The memory of sitting there, watching Jennifer's location, heart pounding as I realized the truth, felt like a lifetime ago. The pain wasn't raw anymore. It was a dull ache, a reminder of everything I'd survived. I thought about the man I was that night, desperate, heartbroken, clinging to the hope that maybe I was wrong. I didn't recognize that version of myself anymore, because now I knew better. I learned to trust my instincts, to never ignore the signs. But most importantly, I learned that losing someone toxic is never really a loss. If Jennifer thought she broke me, she was wrong. I was free. And as I drove away from that parking lot, leaving the ghosts of my past behind, I knew one thing for certain. The best revenge is living well. The autumn air carried a crisp bite as Chris stood on the balcony of his new apartment, the city skyline shimmering below. It had been 2 years since the divorce, 2 years of rebuilding, healing, and learning to trust again. The scars were still there, faint but present, reminders of a battle fought and won. Beside him, Megan leaned against the railing, her laughter warm and unburdened. The bond they'd forged in the ashes of betrayal had deepened into something neither had anticipated. A partnership built on mutual respect and quiet understanding. They weren't the same broken people who'd stormed into that house all those months ago. They'd grown, and in doing so, had found a future worth fighting for. "You're quiet tonight," Megan remarked, nudging him gently. Chris smiled, his gaze lingering on the horizon. "Just thinking about how far we've come." She followed his gaze, her expression softening. "We've earned this, you know. The peace, the happiness." He nodded. They had. Jennifer's downfall had been swift and merciless. Stripped of her financial safety nets and ostracized by the social circles she'd once dominated, she'd become a ghost of her former self. The luxurious townhouse, the designer wardrobe, the carefully curated image, all of it vanished, replaced by a cramped studio apartment and the suffocating weight of regret. She tried to claw her way back, of course. Freelance gigs, half-hearted attempts to reconnect with old acquaintances. But the world had moved on, and without her lies to prop her up, she had nothing to offer. The final blow came when Ryan, desperate to salvage what was left of his own life, publicly denounced her in a tell-all interview. His confession painted her as the mastermind behind their affair, the architect of their mutual ruin. Overnight, whatever sympathy she'd hoped to garner evaporated. Now, she sat alone in her dimly lit apartment, scrolling through social media, a habit she couldn't quit, no matter how much it stung. A photo caught her eye, Chris and Megan, smiling at a charity gala, their hands intertwined. The caption read, "Celebrating new beginnings." Her throat tightened. They looked happy, truly happy. No masks, no games. Just two people who'd weathered the storm and emerged stronger. For the first time, Jennifer allowed herself to wonder, what if I'd chosen differently? But the question came too late. The damage was done. Ryan's redemption had been quieter, though no less arduous. After Megan filed for divorce, he'd hit rock bottom, a series of dead-end jobs, a DUI, and a stint in rehab. But somewhere in the rubble of his mistakes, he'd found a sliver of clarity. He started small, therapy, reconnecting with his estranged sister, volunteering at a community center. The road was long, and forgiveness didn't come easily, not from others, and certainly not from himself. But slowly, he began to rebuild. One evening, as he sorted donations at the shelter, a familiar face walked in. Megan, flanked by their 2 children, dropped off a box of winter coats. Their eyes met briefly, and for a heartbeat, the old anger flared. But then his daughter waved at him, tentative but hopeful, and something inside him shifted. "Thank you," Megan said quietly, her tone neutral but not unkind. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. Chris's phone buzzed as he and Megan prepared dinner later that week. The screen lit up with a notification, an email from his publisher. His memoir, Through the Fire, had hit the bestseller list. Megan grinned, reading over his shoulder. "Told you it'd resonate." He chuckled, setting the phone aside. "Still feels surreal." The book had been cathartic to write, a raw account of betrayal, resilience, and the messy road to self-discovery. Readers had flooded his inbox with stories of their own struggles, thanking him for giving voice to their pain. It wasn't the legacy he'd imagined, but it was one he could be proud of. As they sat down to eat, Megan hesitated, her fork hovering over her plate. "I've been thinking about us. About what's next." Chris raised an eyebrow. "Oh." She met his gaze, her eyes steady. "I want to adopt. There are so many kids out there who need a home, who need people to fight for them." The words hung in the air, fragile and hopeful. For a moment, Chris was transported back to that parking lot, to the man he'd been, broken, furious, certain he'd never trust again. But here, now, with Megan's hand in his and a future stretching out before them, he knew. Love wasn't about avoiding pain. It was about choosing to rebuild, together. "Let's do it," he said softly. Months later, Chris found himself back at the coffee shop where it had all unraveled. The place had been renovated, brighter, airier, the scars of the past painted over. He ordered a latte and took a seat by the window, watching the world pass by. A familiar figure paused outside, her reflection ghostly in the glass. Jennifer. She looked thinner, her once vibrant aura dulled by time and regret. Their eyes met through the window, and for a heartbeat, the old anger surged. But then, something unexpected happened. She nodded, just once, before turning away. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't closure. But it was acknowledgement, a silent admission that the scales had balanced at last. Chris exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing. He took a sip of his coffee, the bitterness tempered by sweetness, and pulled out his phone. A photo of Megan and their newly adopted daughter, Lily, grinned back at him, a mosaic of joy and second chances. He typed a message to Megan, "Heading home soon. Save me some pancakes." As he stepped into the sunlight, the past finally released its hold. The future, messy and beautiful and entirely his own, waited. 5 years later, Chris stood at the edge of a lakeside dock, Lily's laughter ringing in his ears as she chased fireflies. Megan joined him, her hand slipping into his. "She's going to fall in love with this place," she said, nodding toward the cabin behind them, their sanctuary, miles from the city's noise. Chris smiled. "Already has." The woods echoed with the sounds of their new life. Crackling bonfires, late-night storytelling, the steady rhythm of a family forged not by blood, but by choice. Miles away, Jennifer sat in a quiet library, penning a letter she'd never sent. The words were clumsy, inelegant, but honest, a confession to the man she'd wronged and to herself. When she finished, she folded the paper and tucked it into a drawer, a secret buried but not forgotten. And Ryan, now a counselor at the same shelter that had once saved him, handed a blanket to a shivering teenager. "It gets better," he said, the words tasting less like a lie and more like a promise. The world kept turning, its fractures healing unevenly but inevitably. For some, the wounds became wisdom. For others, a cautionary tale. But for all of them, the lesson remained. The best revenge was never destruction. It was redemption.